So here we go again. Another Broncos inept, low scoring loss where they just simply were not good enough. Damari Mathis, he is the number two corner for the Denver Broncos, was repeatedly targeted, whether it's Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, whoever was on his side. They would clear out that side of the field and they would just throw in his direction. And two touchdowns were caught on Damari Mathis today, including crucial third downs at the end of games and during over the course of the games to sustain drives as well. Patrick Surtain was excellent, got called with a pass interference, but the Broncos ended up getting a stop and an interception inside of the goal, inside of the end zone. And yeah, one of those frustrating things. Russell Wilson actually had a really decent game, for the most part. Russell Wilson in the first half was 17 and 19. He was 17 and 19, looking really good, executing the offense really well. Passer rating about a 129, threw for 125 yards, had a touchdown. He was doing everything that you thought he should do. So he was playing within himself, wasn't taking any risks. He was playing smart. But, Will Lutz was the recent acquisition by Sean Payton from the New Orleans Saints. Will Lutz missed a PAT when the Broncos were trying to tie it at 7-7, and then he missed also a field goal from 55 that was off to the right, and that cost the Broncos a total of 4 points in the game. They lost by one. So it's very frustrating. I know you're frustrated. I know everybody is kind of tired of having to have this same conversation about the Denver Broncos and their team and their prospects and are they going to be able to turn it around? Is this the year? Is next year the year? Is Sean Payton the coach? Is Russell Wilson going to be bouncing back? It's really frustrating, and it's just been years. The offense hasn't been good since 2014, y'all. We're 9 years out of that. That season was 9 years ago, and the Broncos haven't had a good offense ever since. And they just haven't been able to put it together. They refuse at times to deconstruct it completely and start over. And so they kept trying to mid-build around a good defense or an elite defense and never worked. And now the defense, wasn't getting enough stops, wasn't generating any pressure, and gave up the run to Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of the game to seal the deal. So, yeah, it's just one of those things, man. It's just it's very frustrating. You definitely expected more today from everybody. Today, Russell Wilson was 27 for 34, 177 yards, had a 108 rating. Jimmy Garoppolo was 20 and 26 for 200 with two TDs, had a 107.9 rating. Josh Jacobs had 19 carries for 48 yards. Run defense was really good. Javonte Williams, 13 for 52. Samaje Perine, 8 for 41. And it was a defensive game. But they just could not seem to put it together. And, they had some personal fouls. Kareem Jackson got one on a hit on Jacoby Myers at the end of the game, a targeting call. They had some holding. Manhurst had a really bad holding. I believe it was on a first down. And they were actually on the Raiders side of the ball. They got a holding, and then they had a sack, and then they had a screen that got blown up, and they got taken completely out of field goal range. And so it is just one of those things where you're watching the team, and again, the execution was better from the offense in terms of they got down the field, they got in a field goal opportunity, obviously didn't execute, but for some reason the play calling and the execution would become a little stagnant at times, and they just wouldn't seem to have the same confidence in certain spots in the field. So obviously everyone is very frustrated because, you lost 16-17 last year. You lost 16-17 this year. But guess what? Last year, people made an excuse. No one's going to make an excuse this year. You have to win. You should have beat the Raiders. You haven't beaten the Raiders in your last 7 tries. You haven't beaten the Raiders in 3 years. What is this? The Raiders? They're not even a good team. That's the thing. They're also in a place of mediocrity. But the Broncos have just been worse. And so it's definitely frustrating just watching that game. And you just saw the Broncos could have been up 16-10. They had an opportunity up at 17-10. If they would have executed better, they could have been up 21-10 at points. but they just could not put it together, and they couldn't sustain drives. Defensively, they played well relative. You only gave up 17 points, but again, key stops, they just couldn't do it. They just could not do it. So, we're back to the drawing board, and I would say Marvin Mims showed why he has a lot of potential today. Marvin Mims only had 2 catches for 9 yards, but he looks good. Troutman had led the team in reception for 5 for 34 yards. And then you had Samaje Perine had 37 yards receiving as well with 4 catches. And Javonte also had 4 catches, only for 5 yards. Yeah, man. Net yards, 260 to 261 for the Raiders, 260 for the Broncos. 4.7 yards average gain per play for the Raiders, 4.5 for the Broncos. And then 94 net running yards for the Broncos. 166 net passing yards for the Broncos. They just didn't do enough. It's really that simple. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no way to get around it and skate around it. They weren't good enough. And until they get good enough, they're going to be mid. They're going to be the mid contest. So they need to blow it up and tank, and they need to do that. But I think Broncos country just deserves better. We didn't grow up with this kind of culture, losing and bad and mediocrity. That's just not how we existed. But, we're at a place now where, obviously the injuries. Caden Stearns also went down today with a knee injury. We don't know how serious that's going to be, but it happened in the first quarter. And obviously, he's a big part of their defense. Alex Singleton was good today at the run. Joji Jewell, last play of the game, or last meaningful play of the game when Jimmy Garoppolo scrambled. Joji Jewell was basically blitzing into the B gap, and so he, instead of staying on his side, on the right side in the B gap, he tried to run the hump and tried to go over the top of the center, and then Jimmy just saw an angle, broke out, took off and ran, and that's ball game. So everybody has your assignment. You have your assignment, what you're supposed to be doing. You have to fulfill it, and you got to do it. So very frustrating, really frustrating loss. Almost like no real words to say with how bad it was. But this is where the Broncos are, and again, until they decide that they want different, and they decide that they want to play different, and they expect different, then, they're going to continue to be at the bottom of the AFC. They play the Commanders next week, and then they play the Dolphins and the Bears. So how will they show up? How will they respond? We'll find out. Man, 16 points. 16 points scored. Exceptional, y'all. Hey, Mile High Sports Swipa gang. I'll see y'all on the other side.